Hey there, everybody. Welcome to my channel, The Magical Solution. My name is Leilani. We are back at it at our reading circle here at This Is How We Grow, and we are continuing moving forward with the Mediums book by Allan Kardec. So once again, if this is the first time that you are joining me here tonight, that is okay. All of my previous episodes are on my YouTube channel at The Magical Solution. But what we're doing here on the reading circle is we are reading various sorts of spiritual texts. I'm reading them out loud for you. I'm interpreting them for you, and I'm giving you an opportunity to participate in a Q&A at the end of the reading about what we just read so that we can clarify anything before we end. All right. So that is the goal of this particular show that I do on Thursday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So what we started off with was the Allan Kardec series, right? We wanted to read at least the first two books of the series written by Allan Kardec. So the first book we already did, that's called the Spirits book. That's on my YouTube. And now we're on the second book, which is the Mediums book. And we're almost there. We got like 4 little chapters left. We're like at the tail end. So I'm so excited. So let's continue on. This chapter is actually really, really exciting because it is about charlatans and tricksters, people who charge money for mediumship and readings and things like that, mediums for hire, etc., etc. So this chapter is going to have all the juice that is hotly debated here on TikTok and on Instagram and on Facebook, right? You have one side of the spiritual community talking about, well, you know what? This is my living. I got to charge for my readings because this is how I live. And then you have the other side of the community that's like, no, our readings, our mediumship is a gift from God, and therefore we should be giving it away for charity. We shouldn't be charging for it. It's against the spiritual stuff, right? So I don't know where you stand, but we're going to find out where Allan Kardec stands and where the spirits that he contacted, where they stand. And we'll take it from there. So here we go. Charlatanism and trickery, mediums for hire and fraudulent manifestations. Let's talk about it. Since anything can be exploited, it is no wonder that there are persons who want to exploit spirits. It remains to know how spirits would take it if such an attempt were made on them. We may state from the start that nothing lends itself better to charlatanism and trickery than such an occupation. Since there are many more fake mediums than somnambulists, this simple fact in it of itself is a basis for distrust. On the other hand, unprofitableness is the best response to those who not only see the phenomenon as clever tricks, there is no such thing as non-profit charlatanism. Ooh. What reason would persons have for practicing deceit without profit, especially if their recognized trustworthiness places them above suspicion? Ooh. Now let's keep in mind, all right, let's keep in mind that when this was written back in the 1800s, there was a huge science movement happening where they were trying to step away from superstition. And so you saw a lot of scientists, a lot of philosophers, a lot of people going to these, magic shows and these seances and these events that had, magic tricks in it for the sole purpose of debunking them, right? And for calling out fake mediums and fake magicians and fake this and fake that. So this was written in response to that, in the sense that we shouldn't charge money because that is yet just another reason that they could say that we're fake. All right, just putting that out there, okay? Now, if mediums use their faculties for monetary gain raises suspicions about mediums in general, it does not prove that such suspicions have any foundation. So at least he's acknowledging that. They may truly have the faculty and still act in good faith, although expecting to get paid. In that case, let us see if it is possible to expect a satisfactory result. If someone has really understood what we have stated about in the conditions required to serve as interpreters for good spirits, the multiple cases that can repel them, the circumstances which, apart from spirit's will, might be obstacles to their manifestation, and finally, all the conditions of a moral nature that can influence communications, how could he or she believe that a spirit, even if it's of lowest order, would at all times be under the orders of paid mediums and be subject to their demands to answer to the curiosity of the first inquisitor who came along? If we understand the aversion good spirits hold for anything that has the small avarice and selfishness about it, and the little importance that they attach to material matters, how could we possibly believe that they would help those who intend to make a business of their manifestations? The idea is repugnant to no reason, and one would have to know next to nothing about the nature of spirit world to accept such a thing. However, since frivolous spirits are less scrupulous and look for occasions to amuse themselves at our expense, it might be that if we are not fooled by a fake medium, it is still quite possible to be fooled by some of these spirits. These simple considerations provide us with a measure of confidence to be given to these type of communications. But why resort to paid mediums nowadays if the faculty may be found among family members, friends, and acquaintances at no cost, if we ourselves do not possess it? So here, Allan Kardec kind of likes to throw the moral card at people, right? Because we talked about in the spirits book and even part of the mediums book how mediums must have high moral character in order for good spirits to be attracted to those mediums and answer questions and manifest themselves, et cetera, et cetera. And high order spirits do not acknowledge and do not play with curiosities and people who are, just messing around, or people who do not have a high moral distinction. And so he's throwing that back at us by saying, for you to charge money for this gift is lowering your moral status. And we know that by lowering your moral status, that doesn't mean that you may not have the gift. It just means that the spirits you're going to be contacting for the paid work that you're doing are going to be of lower order, spirits that are just mischievous and want to entertain themselves by playing along to the curiosities that you have. But you'll never get a high order spirit in these instances because high order spirits don't entertain paid readings. So he's kind of throwing that in our faces in this sense, right? So let's see what else. This is so juicy. Okay. If someone has really understood what we have stated about the conditions required to wait, did I say that already? Okay, got it. I'm here. Mediums for hire are not only those who ask for payment. Such self-interest does not always appear as ambition for material profit, but also as a pretense of any kind that may support personal desires. This is one of the weaknesses that mocking spirits know very well to exploit, skillfully and astutely taking advantage of it and lulling those who fall under their influence into deceptive illusion. In sum, mediumship is granted for practicing the good, and the good spirits withdraw from anyone who intends to transform it into a means of reaching anything contrary to the designs of Providence. Selfishness is the scourge of society, and good spirits strive against it constantly. Therefore, one should never suppose that spirits would ever want to aid it. This is so reasonable that it would be needless to insist on the matter. Ooh. Okay, so listen. All right. So as a paid medium, right? As someone who does this for a living, this is where I tend to see a lot of the fanaticism in spiritist communities, evidential mediumship communities, psychic medium communities. This idea that, even if you have a gift, you should not be paying, you should not be charging for that gift because it is against spiritual and moral matters. And I feel like, again, when we start talking about morals, when we start talking about spirits, because I talk about that stuff all the time, I'm very much about moral and ethical standards. But we do start to cross into a much more personal conversation, a much more subjective conversation, because moral on a standard level or ethical on a standard level can be a very tricky thing to talk about. You know what I mean? So this is where I think a lot of mediums tend to disagree and have a lot of like heated debate. Tell me what you think in the comments for sure, because especially if you are someone who identifies as a paid medium, or does spiritual service for hire, I would love to hear this idea of someone calling you a charlatan just for that reason alone, not for the fact that you have gifts, but just for that reason alone. I would love to hear your opinion. Let's keep going. Physical effects mediums. So these are mediums of a category in which they are able to have spirits move objects or be able to use like Ouija boards or pencils or things like that. They're physical mediums. Okay. Such effects are usually produced by low order spirits with fewer scruples. This does not imply that these spirits are necessarily evil. However, a person may be simply a porter, but yet be very honest. Mediums of this type who desire to exploit their faculty could easily find a spirit to assist them without much hesitation. However, when in this case, there is a problem. Physical effects mediums, like those who provide intellectual communications, have received their ability for good purposes and not for their own personal satisfaction. So if they abuse it, they could lose it or be harmed by it because in reality, less evolved spirits are under the orders of highly evolved ones. So that sentence right there, oof, you guys, you have no idea how many times I hear that if you abuse it, you lose it from the spiritual community, in the sense that if you charge for your readings or you do readings for hire, you're going to lose your ability to read, right? The sentence does not say that. The sentence says that because you are doing this for hire, you are more likely going to be contacting lower level spirits, and lower level spirits at the end of the day follow orders from higher level spirits. And at the end of the day, higher level spirits will not participate in paid readings. So they may instruct the lower level spirits to not even talk to you. And so on your end, you might be thinking, oh shit, I'm not getting anything. Oh my God, I lost my ability. But the reality is that your higher spirits are saying, no, don't talk to that person because they are doing mediumship for hire and that's not what we do. That doesn't mean that your gift went away. That doesn't mean that your abilities are gone. It just means that the spirits that you are trying to reach out to are not wanting to reach out back. That's all. So that sentence gets misconstrued a lot in this, like a lot. And I definitely want to squash that because that's not how it works. Your gifts are yours. They're not going to get taken away as some spiritual repercussion or as some punishment for charging for readings. That's not how that works. Anyway, little evolved spirits love to deceive, but they themselves do not like to be deceived. Even though they may spontaneously share in the games and caprices of curiosity because they enjoy amusing themselves, they dislike being exploited or serving as accomplices in money-making schemes. Moreover, they are always proving they have their own will and that they act however and whenever it seems best to them, which renders physical effect mediums even less certain of the regulatory of manifestations than writing mediums. So, intending to produce them on certain days and at certain times would show profound ignorance. So, what can they do to ensure money? Gotcha. To ensure money. Well, fraudulently simulate the phenomena. So again, it's this idea of, since they cannot produce, since you're working with lower level spirits may not produce for you every single time you request them, because again, they have their own free will, or they might be under the instruction of a higher level spirit. So because of that, to claim that you are a medium that is 100% accurate 100% of the time, all the time, is some of the biggest fraudulent mistakes anyone could make about their business and about who they are. So what do you do in order to make sure you constantly get that money flow in? What do you do in order to maintain your status? You simulate the phenomenon. And this is where cold reading and people who get degrees in NLP or psychology or hypnosis become very, very, very lucrative mediums. Okay, because they understand the psychology of the mind, they understand how to do hypnosis, they understand that certain words can trigger certain feelings, certain emotions, certain memories. They know that if they say certain things, they can condition you to think a certain way, etc., etc. And so your mediumship session becomes a simulated phenomenon, a simulated response that you came in with thinking in your mind, and they help to manifest through these other methods, such as hypnosis, psychology, NLP, all those other things. Okay. So just keep that in mind. That's what they're talking about here, is that if these people cannot get the spirits 100% of the time, then they have to simulate it in whatever means necessary. So that is what some may resort to, not only those who accept such an occupation, but also even apparently simple individuals who think it is a much easier way to make a living than having to work for it. If an actual spirit doesn't produce anything, they make up for it in other ways. The imagination is very fertile when it comes to making money, at least. Since required payment is a legitimate motive for suspicion, that in and of itself is justification for strict examination, which should offend no one without justifying such suspicion. However, this suspicion is as legitimate in cases of payment as it is offensive in relation to honorable and disinterested individuals. Even when restricted to physical manifestation, mediumship has not been granted for putting on shows. Those who think that spirits are under their orders for public exhibition may rightly be suspected of charlatanism or skillful sleight of hand. Let us always remember this when we see ads for spiritist and spiritualist seance with paid admission, and remember what we will get when attending these shows. From everything we have said, we may conclude that absolute disinterestedness in profit is the best guarantee against charlatanism, for if it is, it does not always ensure the veracity of intelligent communication. It at least deprives evil spirits of a very powerful means of actions and shuts the mouths of certain detractors. We will now briefly address amateur trickery, i.e., the innocent fraud of certain pranksters. This deception may be practiced as entertainment at unimportant and frivolous meetings, but never in serious gatherings that only admit honest personas. Someone may derive pleasure from monetary trickery, but he or she would have to be strangely patient to keep up such a role for months and years, and each time for long hours in a row. Only some kind of profit could lead someone to persevere for so long, and profit, we will repeat, should immediately arouse suspicion. One might argue that mediums cannot donate all of their time to the public in the interest of spiritism because they need to make a living. However, it is in the interest of spiritism or in their own interest that they donate their time. And might it they anticipate it before anything as a possible lucrative occupation? Dedicated people can always be found at a price. Do they have only this occupation at their disposal? We mustn't forget that whether they are of high order or low order, spirits are the souls of the dead. If morality and religion obligate us to respect their physical realms, then there is an even greater obligation to respect their spirits. Woo! You know what he just said? Do you know what he just said to you? He said, okay, because we get this argument a lot. We get the argument of, well, you know what? I charge for my readings because it is my only means of income. Like, I have to do this. I have to eat. I have to put a roof over my head. I have to feed my children. And he basically said to you, are there no other jobs? Are there no other jobs? Like, for real? Is this the only thing you can do? Is this the only way you can put food on the table? Because last I checked, there's tons of jobs out there that you could do. And last I checked, in the Spirits book, it said that you need to donate. If you're going to do this, if you're going to dedicate your time to Spiritism for the purpose of helping others, it should be donated through charity. That's what he said to you. Again, tell me in the comments how you feel about that, y'all, because it's a hotly debated subject. It really, really is. People talk about it all the time. You shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be doing that. Oh, but I have to. There's no other way. Or, oh, I don't want to do any other job. My whole purpose, what makes me feel good, is doing things that are spiritual. Blah 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 blah. What do you say? I'm curious. Oh, that is like so juicy. Anyway, let's get back to it. So, what do we say about someone who dug up a corpse in order to display it for money because it was capable of arousing curiosity? Would it be any less disrespectful to display the spirit than the body under the pretext of being curious to see how the spirit acts? And we should note that the price for a seat will reflect the scope of the tricks and the attractiveness of the show. Even if during its lifetime a spirit had been a comedian, it would certainly not suspect that after death it would encounter an entrepreneur who would make it perform for free while he or she made a profit from it. We must remember that both physical and intelligent manifestations are only permitted by God for our instruction. Ooh, child. In spite of these moral considerations, we, of course, cannot deny the possibility that there are paid mediums who are honest and conscientious, since there are honest individuals in all occupations. We are only addressing abuse. Nonetheless, we must agree that, for the reasons we have given, there is more likelihood for abuse among paid mediums than among those who consider their faculty as a gift and use it only to serve others. Ding, 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 ding. So there's your paragraph, people. There's the sentence that all of you have been waiting for. The spirit identifies that there are honest mediums in business who are taking money for their services, and that the real issue is not in the money for the services, but in the abuse of the money of the services, right? So, like, for example, like what I do, you know, when I have spirit circles, which are supposed to be circles for spiritual development and for the community, that money that gets donated to me, I will donate to different charities. Okay. So technically it only flows through me to get to those charities, but it is not something that goes directly to me. I will only take a small portion of that. And literally that goes to the Zoom subscription and to the PayPal little percentage fees and stuff like that. It goes to that, really, to pay for all of those things. So it's really important that if that is going to be something that you do, what Allan Kardec and what the spirit in this particular book is saying is that just don't abuse it, you know? But again, what does that mean to you? Like, what does abuse mean to you in this particular case? Is $10 too much? Is that abusive? Is $200 too much for a mediumship reading? Is that abusive? Like, where is the line? And what does that look like for you? What have your spirits said to you about this particular thing? And it's important for us to really analyze that and go over what our moral codes are for this kind of work, right? Besides the circumstances, the degree of trust or distrust that we concede to paid mediums depends more than anything else on their character and their morality. Mediums who have a serious and eminently useful purpose, but who are prevented from using their time in another activity, are for this reason exempt from other obligations and cannot be confused with speculating mediums who have premeditatively made mediumship a business. Okay? You saw what he said there? It's about their moral character, right? So if you see these mediums out here, you know, doing all this morally shady shit, being, sus in a lot of different areas and then charging an exorbitant amount of money and doing all this stuff, those are the people he's talking about. But when you see mediums out here who, yeah, maybe they charge 30, 40, 60 bucks, but they're of good moral character. They give to their community, they give back, they also have other jobs as well. Then it makes sense that that's not who he's talking about, right? But again, you comment, you let me know. Therefore, according to the motive and the purpose, spirits may condemn, absolve, or even favor them. They judge the intent more than the material fact. Okay. The same considerations do not apply to somnambulists who utilize their faculty for profit. Although this exploitation is also subject to abuse, the unprofitableness comprises the greatest guarantee of sincerity. Their situation is different because it is in their own spirit who acts, and consequently is always at their disposal. Actually, they may only... Why does this keep happening to me, you guys? I keep hearing a sound or I have a smell that comes through every time we do this reading together. This is so funny. Spirits are talking. Okay, sorry. Because it is their own spirit who acts, and consequently it is always at their disposal. Actually, they only willfully exploit themselves because they are free to use their own faculties as they please, whereas speculative mediums exploit the souls of the dead. Say it again, Allan. Say it again. We are quite aware that our severity regarding mediums for hire sets us against all who exploit or intend to exploit this new business, as well as their friends who follow their opinion or staunch enemies. We may console ourselves by recalling that the money changers who were expelled from the temple by Jesus could hardly have looked upon him with much favor anyway. We are also faced with individuals who do not regard the matter with proper seriousness, and nevertheless we feel we have the right to have and express our opinion. We would not try to force it on anybody. If the majority have adopted it, however, it is because they have apparently found it to be appropriate. At any rate, we do not see how anyone could approve that there is less possibility for fraud and abuse in speculation than in unprofitableness. On our part, if our writing have contributed to casting doubt on mediumship for hire in France and in other countries, we believe that it will not be one of the least services they have rendered to serious spiritism. So the spirits are basically saying, look, if we cast doubt on the mediumship business, so be it. That's basically what they said. Ah, well, you know. Okay, so now we're on the part of fraudulent manifestations, right? So we've talked about in the past that spirits can manifest things, can move things, can manifest themselves, can manifest inanimate objects from other places, etc., etc. So now we're going to find out how stuff like that is simulated, how that can be fraudulent. So, those who do not accept the reality of the physical manifestations usually attributed them to fraud or special effects. They start with the principle that skillful illusionists can do things that seem miraculous to those who do not know their tricks. Hence, they conclude that mediums are mere schemers. We have already refuted this argument or opinion, particularly in articles about Mr. Home and in the January and February 1858 issues of the Revue Espiritière. We will therefore only say a few things on the matter before addressing a more serious topic. There is one consideration that will not escape anyone who reflects on the matter just a little. There are undoubtedly illusionists of amazing skill, but they are rare. If all mediums practice sleight of hand, we would have to agree that this art has made enormous progress in a short amount of time and has suddenly become very well known, since it may be found to be an innate ability among persons who have never suspected it, even children. Does the fact that there are charlatans who sell their snake oil in public and even doctors who privately abuse their clients abuse a client's trusts mean that all doctors are charlatans or that the medical class has lost its respectability? Does the fact that there are persons who sell colored water as wine mean that all who sell wine are adulterators? And that there is no such thing as pure wine? Anything can be abused, even the most respectable, and we may state that there is also genius in fraud. However, fraud always has some purpose, some material interest. When nothing can be gained from it, there is no interest in it. That is why we have stated that, regarding paid mediums, the best of all guarantees is absolute unprofitableness. Of all the spirit phenomenon, those that are most susceptible to fraud are those involving physical effects, for reasons we must now consider. First, they are directed more towards sight than intelligence, and are therefore more easily imitated by sleight of hand. And second, they arouse more curiosity than the others, and are more appropriate for attracting cowards, and consequently, they are more fruitful. From this double point of view, it is easy to see why charlatans are so interested in imitating these manifestations, since most suspectors are unfamiliar with science. They are generally more interested in entertainment than serious instruction, and we know that entertainment always pays better than instruction. There is more decisive reason to consider, however. Sleight of hand can imitate physical effects and only requires dexterity, but so far it has not been gifted with improvisation, which requires an uncommon dose of intelligence, and it cannot, therefore, produce those beautiful and sublime sayings that spirits normally provide during their communications, which are frequently so apropos. This reminds us of the following occurrence. A literary gentleman came to us one day and said that he was a qualified intuitive writing medium and that he was available to the Spiritist Society. And since it was the society's policy not to accept mediums whose abilities we were unsure of, we asked the visitor first to come to a private meeting to provide us with evidence of his faculty. He actually came to the meeting where several mediums were either writing spirit dissertations or responding with remarkable precision to questions asked of them or about issues on unknown topics. When the visitor's turn came, he wrote some meaningless words and said that he was not feeling well that day, and we never saw him again. He undoubtedly found that the role of an intelligent effects medium was more difficult to enact than he had thought. In all matters, the persons who are easiest to deceive are the ones who do not belong to the trade, and the same applies to Spiritism. Those who are unfamiliar with it are easily fooled by appearances, whereas a preliminary and careful study, not only of the causes of the phenomenon, but also the normal conditions in which they may be produced, would initiate them into the subject and furnish them the means of recognizing frauds. And so this is yet another reason why I love to write blogs and do videos about red flags and about, certain behaviors and certain characteristics you should be aware of in the spiritual community, because fraudulent and charlatans and trickster people are very common in our community. And because our community is so unregulated, like there's no standard, there's no way of saying who is real, who isn't real, what isn't real, people can sort of slither their way in and move about the community quite easily. And again, people who have schooling in psychology, in cold reading, in hypnosis and NLP are also very acute to how to manipulate and move through our spaces. Fraudulent mediums are justifiably stigmatized in the following letter, which we have reproduced from the August 1861 issue of Revue Espirite. So this was a letter in one of their newsletters. Here we go. Dear Sir, one may disagree on certain points and thoroughly agree on others. I have just finished reading some considerations on page 213 of the last issue of your magazine concerning fraud involving issues of spiritual experiments, considerations to which I am happy to have fully dedicated myself. Consequently, all confusion about theoretical and doctrinal matters has disappeared as if by magic. I am perhaps not as severe as you are with regards to mediums who worthily and properly accept remuneration to make up for time dedicated to experiments, which are often long and tiring. However, I am as severe as you, and it is impossible not to be, with regard to those who resort to deception and fraud to compensate for when the promised and hoped for results are absent or insufficient. Mixing truth and error when dealing with phenomenon precipitated by the intervention of spirits is simply disgraceful, and a medium would have absolutely no moral sense in thinking that he or she could do so without scruples. As you have observed perfectly, it casts doubt over the matter in the minds of the indecisive once fraud is recognized. I would add that it is most deplorably compromises honorable individuals who lend the disinterested support of their knowledge and understanding to such mediums, and who have become trusting patrons by sponsoring them in some way. Such an act is committing a true abuse of authority. All mediums who have been caught in in the act of fraud, or if I may use a slightly trivial expression, with their hands in the cookie jar, deserve to be stigmatized by all spiritualists of spiritists everywhere. It is their strict duty to unmask and expose them. If you think it proper to print these few lines in your magazine, they are at your disposal. Sincerely, Matthew. My man he had big feelings about that. Woo. All spirit phenomenon are not equally easy to imitate. There are some that obviously defy every skill of illusion, particularly those involving the movement of objects without contact, the suspension of heavy objects in the air, raps heard in several places at once, apparitions, etc., except by trickery and collusion. This is why we have stated that, in such a case, one must attentively observe the circumstances and especially take into account the character and situation of the persons involved, as well as their objective and interest in being deceptive. This is the best of all controls because there are circumstances that remove all reason for suspicion. Therefore, we think one should at first distrust whoever makes a spectacle or object of curiosity and amusement of these phenomenon, or whoever claims to produce them at will and at the appointed time, as we have already explained. We can never repeat too often that the concealed intelligences who manifest can be offended and want to show us that they also have free will and are not subject to our whims. It is enough for us to point out a few subterfuges employed or which may be employed in certain cases for good faith observers to guard against. It would be a waste of time to try and dissuade those who insist on passing judgment without having delved into the matter. A common phenomenon is that of raps produced within the wood, and which may or may not be accompanied by movements of the table or other objects being used. It is one of the easiest effects to imitate, either with a foot contact or by causing the furniture to produce small crackling noises within it. However, this is a special little maneuver that one should be forewarned about. The hands can be placed close together, flat on the table, so that the thumbnails forcefully support each other. Then, by the entirety imperceptible muscular movement, a dry noise can be produced that is quite similar to inner typology. The noise reverberates within the wood, producing a complete illusion. Nothing is easier to simulate. As many raps as required a drum beat. Then responding to certain questions with a yes or no, with numbers or even letters of the alphabet. Once forewarned, however, it is very easy to recognize the fraud, which is not possible if the hands were far apart from each other, and if we are sure that no other contact can produce the noise. Moreover, true raps display the characteristics of changing places and tone at will, which cannot occur when produced by the cause we have indicated, or any other similar one. Thus, they may jump from the table to some other piece of furniture, not touched by anyone, the walls, the ceilings, etc., and also respond to unforeseen questions. Direct writing is even easier to imitate, without mentioning well-known chemical agents that make writing paper at a given time on a white sheet of paper. What is that sound? I keep getting distracted. I'm sorry, you guys. This ruse can also occur through a skillful sleight of hand, wherein one sheet is replaced by another. Furthermore, the defrauder may distract one's attention while quickly writing a few words. Some have even been known to write with a small pencil lead hidden in the fingernail. Apparitions also lend themselves to sleight of hand. One can easily be deceived by a more or less dexterous, even unprofessional magician. In number 96 above, we stated that spirits themselves determine the exceptional conditions under which their appearances can occur, so that we may conclude that any willful and easily obtained should not at least be considered suspicious. The same applies to direct writing. In the chapter on special mediums, we mentioned what the spirits regard as both common and rare mediumistic aptitudes. One may properly distrust mediums who intend to easily precipitate their apparitions or direct writing, or who aspire to display multiple abilities. Claims they are rarely justified. Depending on the circumstances, intelligent manifestations offer the greatest guarantee against fraud, but even these are open to being imitated, at least regarding banal and commonplace communications. Some think that there is a greater safety concerning mechanical mediums, not only with regard to the independence of ideas, but also against deception. And this is why certain persons prefer physical intermediaries. Nevertheless, this is a mistake, for fraud slips everywhere. We know that with enough dexterity, even a writing basket or planchette can be directed at will, giving it all the appearances of spontaneity. What removes all doubts are the thoughts expressed by the medium, whether he or she is mechanical, intuitive, auditory, speaking, or seeing mediums. There are communications of this type that are so far beyond the ideas, knowledge, and even intellectual reach of the medium that it would be necessary to be oddly mistaken to attribute them to the medium. We realize that charlatanism can be very skillful and resourceful, but we have never known it to have the gift of transmitting knowledge to the ignorant, or intelligence to someone who does not have it. To sum up, we repeat that the best guarantee is in the recognized morality of the medium themselves and the absence of all causes of material interest or vanity that could simulate them to exercise their mediumistic faculties, because these same causes can lead them to simulate those that they do not actually possess. Okay? So basically the spirits gave every possible way that, well, not every possible way, the majority of commonplace ways in which frauds can simulate or imitate the gifts of a medium, whether it's auditory, seeing, writing, moving object, whatever the gift is. The spirit discussed on how someone can fake that. But what the spirit is also saying, and what Allan Kardec is interpreting for us here, is that when it comes down to it, you can fake all of the external stuff you want, but you can't fake the actual communications, what the spirits are actually saying. Because when you're dealing with high order spirits whose sole purpose is to educate the masses and to bring spiritism to the forefront, it's going to come out in a highly moralized and intellectual way. It's not going to come out willy-nilly. It's going to be very intentional, and it's going to be very smart, if you will. And people who are fraudulent and people who are utilizing low-level spirits cannot hold up that facade for too long. You will see slips in their communications. You will see inconsistencies in the way that they speak, etc. And the spirits are basically saying here that no matter what, when high order spirits want to be known, they wait for the most perfect circumstances to show themselves in big ways, and those circumstances cannot be replicated. So people who are fraudulent simply just cannot imitate the spontaneity of the spirits themselves. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. So now I'm going to open up the floor to questions. You can ask me questions about what we just read. You can ask me questions about mediumship and spiritism as a whole, whatever you'd like, but we're not doing readings. So let's just put that out there. So let's see what we have here. So here on Facebook, we have some agreement here that there are cultures who do not do spiritual work for pay, that it shouldn't, that it should be free. And on the flip side, there are other cultures that actually need to do it for some kind of reimbursement and shouldn't be for free, because the exchange of energy and this idea of like something always costs something else. Like there's always an exchange. Like things don't happen just for nothing. And so, I know in indigenous cultures and places that I'm familiar with, the medicine men, the shamans, the root doctors, the witch doctors, the curanderas, the whatever you want to call them, they did their spiritual work, but at the same time, the community took care of them, so the community would feed them, would take care of the home, would give them trinkets, give them offerings to show their appreciation. So these healers and these mediums and these community members were technically getting paid. It's just in their own way. Some people say that it's very situational. This idea of paid readings is very situational, very true. Yeah. So here we have, it is not that the advice is bad, but it can be misleading or novel. Over time, though, I think that you can see why you were told that piece of info. Like, not everything can be revealed at that time, but over time, it will make more sense. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. We have another comment here that says, it's almost like telling a musician or an artist to do their talents for free and then go work a full-time job to have money to live. Exactly. Exactly. They could do those other jobs, but how would they be living within their purpose to the community if they do not have the time to pursue their purpose? Exactly. Exactly. Another question here, but what if those actions was caused by spirits? Aren't the high spirits too serious with a way that they don't allow them to be a part of a spiritual show regularly? Not necessarily. So in previous chapters, right, we talked about how sorry. We talked about how you know, our guardian spirits, our higher level spirits that are in our spiritual court may oftentimes utilize lower level spirits to teach us lessons, um and in one of those instances it might be just that. It might be that, if you are a medium for hire, that because the higher level spirits won't touch that with a 10-foot pole, instead they'll just allow the lower level spirits to kind of entertain themselves and play along with you, while you give readings to these people. But there can come a point in which they see that you're abusing that. Maybe you're not giving helpful information to your clients. Maybe you're not really helping or serving the community, utilizing these lower level spirits. So they may just take away the lower level spirits as well and say, you're not going to talk to this person. You're not going to talk to this spirit either, because you're not doing this right. You know what I mean? It's like telling the CEO to go clean the bathroom. I love it. All right, let's go to TikTok here and see what kind of questions we have from TikTok. Hello, good evening from the UK. So user 207, with regards to what this live is about, we are reading The Medium's book by Allan Kardec. We do this every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's not just Allan Kardec books. We're going to be reading all different kinds of spiritual texts moving forward. It just so happens that this one happens to be a really thick, meaty one, so it's taking us a while to get through. Okay. And it's lovely to meet you too. Okay, so their question is there more? Is it true that there are only 4 clairs? Can you be more intuitive to one or more? From what, scientifically speaking, right? And based on how our body actually functions, our body actually has around 56 to 58 ways of interpreting our environment, of perceiving and interpreting our environment. Of those 58 ways, we know of a good solid 8 of them that we would consider the clairs. There's about 8 clairs that we pay close attention to. And those clairs help us not only interpret our physical reality, but also to interpret the spiritual realms, the various spiritual realms. Because these particular 8 clairs transcend material, the material world. So, and can you be more intuitive to one or more? Yes. Usually, the average Joe Schmo who doesn't consider themselves psychic or medium, usually has 1 or 2 clairs that they do actually do very well. They just don't know that they're doing it well, and they don't want to acknowledge that they're doing it. But usually about 1 or 2 people have, on average. Those who study and are trying to develop their gifts and trying to develop their mediumship can exercise their other clairs and get them strong. Maybe not perfect, but can get them pretty strong. It's like exercising any muscle in the body. So hopefully that answered your question. This is a great question from Facebook. It says, is that why people get quote unquote punished by spirit? like spirit keeping you in check and closing you off to spirit. So yeah, I like that you use the word punished in quotes, because it's true. Like, the Allan Kardec books and the way that it's spoken about, it can easily be interpreted as though your spirits are punishing you. They're taking away your gift, or they're taking away access to something, or they're quote unquote going silent. Um, it can easily be interpreted as a bad thing, but really it's not. Your spirit guides, your higher order spirits, what they do, number one, is always by the work of God, right? So whatever they're doing it from the word of God, right? First. And it's never unintentional. It's never something that's like just haphazardly done. So when you feel, like a lot of people like to call it the dark night of the soul, right? We hear about things from Mother Teresa, we hear about things from Saint Augustine, we hear about things from a lot of these different saints and monks, right, who talk about this dark night of the soul, where they seem to be disconnected from God, where they're not hearing God anymore, where they're not, the angels are no longer coming to them. They're praying, but they're feeling like they're not being heard, like as if spirit has abandoned them. And they go through this deep existential crisis. They go through this deep depression and sense of mourning, this loss of spirit in a way, right? And the reality is that though that time period is a test, your good spirits will never leave you. God will never leave you. You are not abandoned. You will never be abandoned, but you will get tested. And these tests are really important. Now, I'm not coming at you from this like Christian, like, you know, oh, well, the people over in this country are starving because they're being tested, or, oh, this person, got, SA'd because they were being no, I'm not saying none of that shit. That shit is fucked up. That is horrible. That is not at all where I'm going with this. Where I am going with it, though, is when it comes to your gifts, when it comes to, your ability to communicate and be in contact with spirit and with your own spirit. You go through several tests throughout your lifetime, several. And it's just yet another one, and this chapter in particular, it's the test of, greed. It's the test of being selfish and being greedy and partaking in vanity and using your gifts to clout chase and to, to get views and to get likes and, charging obscene amounts of money, not for the betterment of your spiritual community, not for the betterment of your of people around you who are suffering, but simply for your own vanity and for your own wants and desires. These types of abuses are what Allan Kardec and his spirits are saying, that your spirits will then, you know, um, take away access to certain spirits. They'll tell the lesser order spirits who love to engage in these kinds of activities with you to back off. So it's not that you lost your gift. It's not that you're disconnected from spirit. It's not that you're disconnected from God. It's not that you no longer are a medium. It's the access that you now have to these particular spirits have been put on a hiatus until you figure out what it is that you're doing and what your purpose is. You know what I mean? Does he make offering to spirits? Who's he? Allan Kardec? Does he make offerings to spirits? Is that what you're asking? See, that's beautiful. So we have someone here who went through a dark night, and once they got themselves out of certain situations that were holding them back, it's like they rediscovered themselves again. That's beautiful, and that's exactly what it is. It's this idea of what the spirits are doing. Okay, so let me kind of, just give you a quick interpretation of where the mindset is. What your spirits are doing when things go quiet is they're taking away distractions. When you lose everything, when you're in that period of darkness, you lost your job, you lost your relationship, you have no more money, you're in a rut, you feel like you've lost your connection to God, your family is in arguments with you, your friends have left, and you're in this like place, right? It's a test in the sense of you needed to literally be left alone. You needed all the distractions to be taken out of your field of vision so that you can listen. Because the answers are there. God is always speaking to you. Your spirits are always speaking to you. But you need to listen. And when you had all those distractions and when all those things were in your sphere harming you and hurting you and causing you to engage in bad behaviors, you were not listening. So they take away the distractions. And it seems like you're losing everything. It seems like you're losing control, but you're not. It's that moment in which you're being asked to surrender. You're being asked to surrender to that loss of control and realize that the control was never yours to begin with. It was always in God's hands. And you need to surrender to that. And when you do that, all of a sudden, the doors open up to you again. Your spirits can be heard again. Things are seen differently again. And you'll go through that several times throughout your life. Like, it's not going to happen just once. You might have the first time is always the biggest, I think, for a lot of people, because it's like so intense and it's like, holy shit. But it's going to happen again and again. And in those moments are lessons to be learned. These are times for you to kind of stop and look around and be like, what the fuck? Like, what just happened? Why? What did I do? Or what was going on around me that I wasn't seeing, or whatever the case may be. And that you're being called to reanalyze and to listen again so that you can figure it out. And those revelations, right? Those epiphanies is what opens those dark windows, those those shades, and lets the light back in again, Yes, okay. So Allan Kardec, the first two books is what we got to so far. Him as a spiritist, okay, he's not the kind that really does the whole religious stuff of spiritism. He's approaching it from a very scientific point of view. So he's doing he's writing these books as if he was interviewing the spirits, as if he was in a lab, speaking to them and writing everything down. So in terms of, leaving offerings and having altars and things like that, that's not really where you're going to see this information. That information we're going to cover with other influencers in the spiritist community who bring into it this idea of a much more ritualistic fusion. Okay, so we're going to start to see the gifts, the mediumistic gifts, the spiritual technologies and the spiritual texts, and then the ritualistic activities that you could do on the side. And we're gonna start piecing it all together as a community. So I hope you stick by us. Like being thrown into the deep end of the pool and figuring out how to swim. Exactly. That's exactly how I learned. That's how I learned how to swim, and that's also how I learned how to drive too. My father, I remember being 16 years old, and my father waited. He waited. Okay, I would ask him every single day, Daddy, can we practice? Can we practice driving? Can I practice driving? And he'd be like, well, we can go to the parking lot. And he would like do like little things with me, but like I wanted to like drive and be on the road and be on like the highway and stuff like that, and he was like, nope, you're not ready yet. You're not ready yet. And then he waited for a February blizzard where it was hailing and sleeting and snowing and gray and foggy outside, where you couldn't see shit, the lights didn't matter, nothing. And he hands me the keys and he goes, okay, Delani, come on, let's go do some driving. Let's take a driving lesson. I'm like, wait, what? I was like, what? I was like, I know I know you lying, because have you seen how sad? Do you know? Like, even good drivers are being advised not to drive right now. Like, are you serious? And he's like, yeah, now you got to learn. We got to learn right now. And he taught me everything: what to do when you slide, what to do when it's low visibility, what happened, why you should be checking your mirrors, blah, 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 blah. And now, psh, you could put me in any driving situation, right? And that's the same concept of spirit putting you through these dark nights. It's like throwing you at the end of the deep pool and saying, figure it out, swim. But just know that the pool that I'm throwing you in, you can still breathe. Like, it's okay. Like, it's like fake water. It's just there to kind of freak you out. All right? Like, it's okay. We got you. So yeah. Do we have any more questions? How are we feeling tonight? Because I'm getting hungry. I'm about to have some dinner. Good? Okay, beautiful. So, once again, like, comment, subscribe, share. Please join me every Thursday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, to continue moving forward and having discussions about our books. And thank you so much for stopping by my channel. Those of you who join me live and those of you who will watch me on the replay, I truly, truly appreciate it. And most of all, remember that this is how we grow, you guys. Have a good night.